Hi everyone, this is part 2 of my big breakdown of Hollow Knight Silksong and everything that we found out and everything that we knew at Gamescom 2025. I've just put out a massive video, I don't know, it was well over an hour long at least, about everything. Both trailers were covered with live reactions and reactions afterwards. I talked about the history of the original game and the game itself, and my opinions and the opinions of all the people on the show floor. I talked about the demo. Oh, just so much Silksong news, and not just my opinions either. We covered the opinions of multiple different games journalists and magazines and websites and what they said, and then I gave my opinions on what they thought and tried to give some context. But probably the biggest news, other than the two trailers, which I reacted to, is a very big article on Bloomberg where Jason Schreier actually interviewed Team Cherry. And I promised I would cover it, but as soon as I took one look at the article, I realized it was very long and I would have a lot to say about it, because for those that don't know, I'm in the entertainment industry. I have been for well over 2.5 decades now. I don't like to even count. I produced many things. I produced movies, video games, comic books, TV series, music albums, worked with many artists in the industry, and there's so much that Team Cherry are going to be saying that I just know. I took one look at it and just skimmed, and I just knew, oh, this has to be a separate article, because I will have, A, it's quite a long article with quite a lot of information, but B, I've got a lot of context to add to this. So for those of you who like hearing my random stories about the industry, or like hearing random kind of musings on what it's like to produce stuff, I hope you find this interesting. But for those that just looking for more solid information on the game and you don't want to hear an old timer like me waffling, then maybe check out the other part. But I hope people are going to find this interesting, because it's a truly interesting article. And as I said before, this article is hidden behind a paywall, so many people won't be able to read it. But I believe this counts as fair use, because I'm going to be giving my opinions on everything and giving context on everything. So we're discussing the article. But for those of you who couldn't read it because it's behind a paywall, hopefully this will give you a very good oversight of everything contained within the article, because it's going to be a very interesting time. Anything from Team Cherry is interesting, let's face it, and Hollow Knight Silksong, could it get more interesting than that? It's a game of the show, isn't it? Absolutely, without a doubt. Let's get right back into part 2, Hollow Knight Silksong, talking about the article. The article is called Why Silksong Took 7 Years to Make. The highly anticipated indie game has been in production for so long that it's become an internet meme. Yes, that's exactly what I said in the last video. It's written by Jason Schreier. Thank you very much, Jason Schreier. Sorry for blatantly taking your content. But yeah, I think this is important. And honestly, I think stuff this important shouldn't be hidden behind a paywall. I mean, even with my Patreon, I have a free tier. I don't hide any content behind a paywall. I don't agree with it. And with my own games, yes, I do publish things like games player guides, which people can choose to buy separately, or they get them free if they buy one of the more expensive editions of the game. But again, I don't want to hide that behind a paywall, so that's only if you want a physical copy. If you want to just be able to read the content, I always make sure that there's a free PDF copy as well, because I don't believe in paywalls, but I know that Bloomberg do. So Mr. Schreier, I'm very sorry, but I believe I'm protected by fair use here, because I'm going to be talking about my opinions on your wonderful article. But I do very much appreciate you for doing this interview and putting out this article. It starts by saying, "Hi everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Game On about a very special game that we'll be playing quite soon." Yeah, special is an understatement. "The wait is over," in bold text. "It's surreal to write, Funny, yeah, I used surreal when I was describing the feeling after watching the trailer. We're not so different, you and I, Mr. Schreier. We've used multiple of the same words and expressions already. Yeah, it's surreal to write, but it's true. Silksong will be out on September the 4th. After 6 years of near-total silence from the developers and enough feverish anticipation to make it the most wish-listed game on Steam, the sequel to the indie hit Hollow Knight is releasing in 2 weeks. Team Cherry, the small team behind both games, announced the news Thursday in a trailer. Why did it take so long? ? Often, such protracted development cycles are caused by mismanagement and end in painful burnout among the staff. But speaking to me last week on a video call from their office in Adelaide, Australia, Team Cherry co-founders Ari Gibson and William Pellan said that making Silksong has been nothing but a joyful process. Yes, that is exactly what I predicted. If you listen to my other episode, yes, that's exactly what my prediction was. I said I'm sure there won't have been any problems in development. It's just that these two are such perfectionists that they just don't want to release the game until they're 100% happy with it. So far so good. This is all not got any new information here so far. This is all just confirming what I've already said in my previous video, but it's nice to have it confirmed. And we have our first quote from Ari Gibson. "We've been having fun," Gibson said. "This whole thing is just a vehicle for our creativity anyways. It's nice to make fun things." Oh, that's really, really nice to read. That is essentially, that's what I said about my own ethos, about making my own games and making my own art. Yes, that's what I feel that games should be. And it's one reason why I got out of the games industry when I did, because I felt like I was becoming more and more funneled into being just a very small part of a large AAA machine, and I didn't get to have fun and I didn't get to be creative. So I moved into an industry where I could have fun and be creative, and I was making movies and animation and things like this. And then because of the COVID lockdowns and not being able to make the films that I was making, I got back into indie dev, and it's great. "We've been having fun," Gibson said. "This whole thing is just a vehicle for our creativity. Anyway, it's nice to make fun things." We're stopping the quote now. We're going back to Jason. "The lengthy production wasn't the result of development challenges or obstacles," they said. "They just needed all these years to ensure that Silksong was the exact game they wanted to make." Yes, this is exactly the same process that I'm going through with my Metroidvania, and exactly the same sentiments that I have, and what I said I hoped was the reason why Silksong had been delayed. "It was never stuck or anything," Gibson said. "It was always progressing. It's just the case that we're a small team and games take a lot of time. There wasn't any big controversial moment behind it." Yes. Good. This is exactly what I predicted and exactly what I said in my previous videos when I was talking about Silksong. And I've said countless times, I don't think there's any big secret behind why it's being delayed. I don't think there's any problems. I don't think there's any problems with the team or financial mismanagement or technical issues. It's just they've sold 15 million copies of Hollow Knight. They don't need to rush this out to make money. And because they're an indie publisher, an indie game, they don't have to worry about a big studio financing the game and then breathing down their neck of, we need to release it by this date, otherwise the shareholders won't be happy. No, this is the strength in indie production. If you're a true artist like Ari and William are, you can wait until you're happy and wait until you're 100% sure it's right. Just the game is ready when it's ready. Excellent. This is a very good sign as far as I'm concerned. Jason continues, "The Silksong saga started in 2017 when Team Cherry released Hollow Knight, an action platformer set in a vast world full of cartoon bugs. A Switch version released the following year added to the momentum. By the end of 2018, millions of fans were raving about its polished gameplay, distinct style, and impeccable vibes. As of today, the game has sold 15 million copies. Yes, I just said that. Team Cherry told me, making it one of the most successful independent video games ever. Yes, I've said all this too, but it's nice that we're confirming the same talking points. Initially, Gibson and Pellon had planned to release an expansion pack revolving around Hornet, one of its key characters, but in February 2019 they announced that the expansion had grown too big and would instead become a full-fledged sequel titled Silksong. Yes, again, I covered this before. There were expansion packs or DLC for the original Hollow Knight, but Silksong is no mere DLC. It's an entirely new game, but kind of based on the original Hollow Knight. It's like the same but bigger, the same but better. But this is an entire game, and I have no doubt that this game is going to be bigger and better in every way. In the last video, I used the analogy of the Mega Drive Genesis Sonic games going from Sonic 1 to Sonic 2. It's like, yeah, it is the same thing, but it's just more of the same and better in every possible way. Extra features that add to the game and don't overcomplicate it, fixing up any minor issues and just expanding on all the things that people liked about the first one. This is what Silksong has always been promised to be, and exactly what I'm expecting it to be, and exactly what I saw in the trailer that I just watched and reacted to. So the article continues. Hollow Knight had been massive, and their plan at the outset was to build a smaller world for Silksong. To ensure that the game felt just as deep, they'd implement an elaborate quest system that would offer the player reasons to backtrack and revisit old locations. That's interesting. I just put out a 2-hour-long deep dive into the Shantae games, because obviously we've just had a brand new Shantae game release, and it's one of my favorite series, and I wanted to cover the whole series. I think the history of the character and the development is interesting. I think it's very interesting from a Nintendo perspective, what it says about the perspective systems like the Game Boy Color, the DSi, the 3DS, and Wii U. You can tell a lot about Nintendo history by kind of following the Shantae games. But I mentioned in that video that my favorite is Pirate's Curse by quite a long margin, even though all of the games are good. But the one thing that reviews sometimes complained about in Pirate's Curse is that it felt almost a smaller map, because it was, even though that's wrong, it's a massive game, much bigger than the previous game, but because the map was split up into separate islands, people felt that somehow it felt smaller. But also people complained that there was a lot of backtracking, and to me that's one of the reasons why I like it. The backtracking doesn't have to be a bad thing. In fact, if your game is designed well enough, revisiting the old locations is part of what makes a Metroidvania so great, because it shows off, oh, I've been to this area before, but now that I have these new moves that I've learned, or now I've got these new skills, or now I've leveled up in this particular way, I can revisit this area, and it opens up new ways to experience it. And backtracking does not have to be a bad thing. If your movement mechanics and your traversal is fun, then backtracking can be a very good thing. So yeah, it's interesting that they're saying that. The article continues. In contrast to Hollow Knight, which had a single town full of shops and characters to meet, there would also be multiple towns, each serving as a hub for quests. Nice. Even at that point, we were recognizing that it was going to become another giant thing to rival the scale of Hollow Knight, or probably exceed it, Gibson said. And then, because of how we work, obviously the world ended up being just as big or bigger. Yes, I mentioned this again when talking about my own games, with even if you try to start a game and if you plan on it being smaller or simpler, feature creep happens to the best of us, and you start making something and you plan on it being simple, but as you're making it you go, oh yeah, I got this really cool idea, wouldn't it be cool if I added that, wouldn't it be cool if we expanded upon that, wouldn't it be cool if this character could also do this, or if this area also had this feature, and you start trying to make a small game. But if you are like myself, or evidently like Ari Gibson, not that I'm comparing myself to Ari Gibson, obviously, but if you're an artistic, creative person, it's almost impossible to make something that is small and simple, because even if you start with that intention, you get more and more creative ideas, and you become, as you become invested in the idea, you become more enthusiastic about it, and therefore you have more ambition and more ideas for it. And it almost becomes about knowing when to stop. With my own games, I've got one game right now which will be announced in October, so I'm not going to go into it too much right now. But yeah, it started off, it was meant to be a very, very simple thing, and it ended up being very, very complex, but I think complex in a good way, in a deep way, and where the ideas are original and expanded upon. But there were certain things that I wanted to add, and I had to stop myself and hold myself back and say, no, you're overcomplicating things, and these don't need to be added for this game. Those certain features can be saved for the sequel, and if the first game is successful, then you can make a sequel which adds those features, because people won't be having to learn the entire game and getting overwhelmed because they've already played the first game. And then for the sequel, you can add those expanded features. And it sounds like that's exactly what has happened with Hollow Knight here. They initially were going to make Silksong as an expansion pack or a DLC, and then they realized, no, actually, this is too complicated. We need to make this as a sequel. Hollow Knight doesn't need this. We can release the game without it. This can be a separate sequel. It sounds like they've gone through exactly the same process. But again, I'm not comparing myself to Team Jerry at all. I'm sure this is something that many artists go through in the video game scene, especially if you are a solo dev or a very small project where you work very closely with each other. You're going to end up having these things where you have like infinite ideas, and at some point you have to say, okay, where do we stop? Which ideas are going too far? Which ideas can be saved for DLC? Which ideas would actually make a spin-off or a sequel, and they're only worth doing if the first game is a success? And yeah, Silksong being essentially the DLC for Hollow Knight that turned out to be so large and so complicated and so ambitious that they made it into a whole extra game. That sounds pretty damn great to me. So where were we? And then, because that's how we work, obviously the world ended up being just as big or bigger, and the quest system existed, and the multiple towns existed, and suddenly you end up 6 or 7 years later. Yep. It all came down to their development style, which may have been too much fun. Gibson and Pellin, who were joined by programmer Jack Vine, composer Chris Larkin, and a few contractors who helped with programming and testing, started off by designing the core gameplay for Hornet, the game's slick protagonist. From there, it was easy to implement and test out new ideas, even as the game grew bigger. Yes, great. So this is what I talked about before, of how basically the team for this, even though this is the most wishlisted game on Steam, even though the first game sold 15 million copies, they haven't suddenly gone, okay, we're a AAA studio now and we need to hire thousands of people, and we're too good to be doing that kind of work now. We're just going to work as producers and kind of oversee the whole thing, and other people can... No. This is a team of basically a handful of people. And one of those people is a composer, so not to a fantastic composer, fantastic music. The music in the trailer was incredible. So I'm not saying that music isn't important, but obviously music isn't really factoring into the programming or the art design or the gameplay itself. So yeah, it really is a handful of people. And the whole started off by designing the core gameplay for Hornet, the game's protagonist. And from there, it was easy to implement and test out new ideas. Yes. This is what so many people get wrong with games design, and especially AAA companies often get really wrong. But it's also what many experts in game design recommend, and Shigeru Miyamoto himself perfected this back in the day and has talked about it at length. I'm thinking about Yahtzee Croshaw as well. People we know used to be the Escapist and now Second Wind. Talks about this often. The core gameplay loop being fun is the most important thing, and the character feeling fun to control is the most important thing. often people get ideas for games and they run away with themselves, think about the worlds and the levels, and they start developing the story and everything else. It's so important to essentially, especially with a platform game, whether it's a 2D platform game, a 3D platform game, whether it's level-based, whether it's Metroidvania, whatever it is, it's so important that the traversal and movement mechanics are fun and satisfying. That basically what you really need to do, the key, is to start developing your game in a blank room, in a blank area, where the level is just a floor to begin with. And you run around that floor, whether it's 2D or 3D, you run around that floor and you create your character and you get your movement and you make sure that you don't start adding things to that floor until the character feels fun. Until when you're testing that demo, you actually don't want to quit because it feels fun when you're playing it. It's just like a fiddle toy, you know, just Mario running around, either a 2D world or a 3D plane. Mario is running around, but it's fun to control him. And the movement of your character feels like it coincides with what you're pressing on the controls. And I mentioned this in my Donkey Kong Bonanza video as well. One of the things that so many platform games get wrong, but what Mario 64 got so right and what Donkey Kong Bonanza also gets so right, is you don't necessarily feel like you're controlling a character. The controls are so linked to the character, you actually feel like you are the character, you know? And when the controls are so right that it becomes instinct, it becomes second nature. Right? You're looking at the character, you're imagining being the character in that world, and the controls are so right that it's just second nature, and you don't have to think about the controls, they just happen. That's ideally what you want to get before you even start adding anything into that world. The next thing you want to add is you want to add some walls, and then get the collision, what happens when you collide with the walls. Then you want to make some smaller walls that are essentially platforms, things that you can jump onto. Things that you can jump between, things that you can grab onto and climb if you have that kind of mechanic. Maybe you can add something like a wall jump, you know. You add these very slowly. Then you add like just one very basic enemy. And to begin with, the enemy doesn't even move, doesn't have any AI. You work out, how are we going to attack the enemy? What, you know, and you do all of this and you can spend, I mean, ideally, you want to spend at least 50% of the development time getting that 100% right, 100% perfect, 100% down, right? Before you start going into making levels and writing a very deep storyline and hiring voice actors and hiring motion capture. And so many games don't get the basics right before they move on. And the problem is, if the basics aren't right, then the rest of the game isn't going to matter because it's not going to be fun. So yeah, what they're talking about here, they're not reinventing the wheel. This is you know, game design 101. But you'd be surprised how many games get this wrong, especially indie games from small teams, because you know, you have all these amazing ideas and you want to implement them. And honestly, that's the fun part. The fun part is designing all the different environments and making all the different enemies and getting the story and getting the magic system and having all different music and different animations and different, yeah. But you need to make sure that the character moves right and is fun and just feels smooth and natural to control first. Then the collision detection, then the combat, and it's only once all of that is in place that you can really start making levels. And when you're making the levels, you can experiment. You get an idea for a gimmick or a mechanic, and you try it out and you see, does it work? And you can just add it into one of those empty levels, one of those kind of sandbox levels, and something that might seem like a really good idea, but then when you implement it into that sandbox, oh, it's a bit clunky, it's a bit awkward, it doesn't work right. And then you can think, okay, well, do we spend the time and the resources trying to make it work? Or do we just go, that was a bad idea, doesn't matter, let's have another idea, let's implement another idea and keep going. And when you find the things that really do work, then you can bring them into the levels. If you design the levels first and you design every single gimmick and every single play mechanic first, in a design document and you get so stuck on that design document that it's your Bible and you're not going to deviate from it. But then once you actually start implementing it and actually start programming it, it doesn't feel very good when you play it. That's a real problem. And that is a major problem for a lot of AAA games, because a lot of AAA games need enormous budgets. And the only way that you get the enormous budgets is by getting the approval of many different producers. Too many cooks spoil the broth style, and these producers often aren't programmers, and often they aren't even gamers themselves. They just know what they think is going to sell, and they want to keep the shareholders happy, right? So often the entire game gets designed from start to finish in a design document, and then programmers are just hired later on to make the thing that is in the design document. And the programmers might realize somewhere along the way, hey, this isn't actually fun. This doesn't actually feel good when I'm controlling it or whatever. But that's not their job. Their job is to do what they're told. And the producers are like, no, we've designed this thing, and it had to go through a committee, and 40 different people had to agree to it. We've told you what to make it. Don't think you're that important that you can tell us that what we've designed is bad. It's exactly the wrong way to make a game, but it's exactly how the large majority of AAA games are made. And it's the same with my work in the movie industry. This is the reason why so many Hollywood blockbusters are terrible. Despite hiring really talented indie directors and things to come on and work on them, thinking of a lot of recent Star Wars and Marvel projects, for example, but, I'm not singling out Disney. It's exactly the same for all the big studios. Often they'll hire a really fantastic director, but that director is told what to do by a million producers who've got a million different ideas, and the director says, no, but that's not going to work. But that's it. And they say, do what we tell you. We're paying you millions of dollars. Just do what we say. And then a really talented director ends up making a film which gets bad reviews and is rubbish and the fans don't like it. And then the director turns around and says, yeah, I knew it was going to be bad. I tried to tell them that wasn't what should happen. Or sometimes the director even gets fired and they bring in somebody else and they do reshoots and re-edits. And the film that ends up in the cinema, even though it says directed by, Mr. X, Mr. X will turn around and say, that's not the film. That's not the film that I directed. That's been massively changed, And this is how we end up with a release the Snyder Cut situation, And again, this happens in the games industry all the time. And this is why nowadays, more often than not, games made with small, passionate, dedicated teams end up being so much better than what the AAA studios are putting out. And this is why, in a way, at the AAA end, this is why I tend to lean more towards Nintendo, because Nintendo still makes games in a slightly more traditional way with slightly smaller teams who are very passionate and know what they're doing, and they're all on the same page. And yeah, even though they do have very big budgets and they're making stuff using very high-tech things, like, DK Bonanza is pretty up there from a tech perspective, but it's a much smaller team than, say, you would find on the latest COD or the latest Assassin's Creed. I'm not calling out those games, although I am a little bit, really. They're very different production methods, and often, not always, absolutely not always, but often, this is why Nintendo at the top end end up making stuff that is more critically acclaimed or more original or feels more consistent with itself. Though I've got to say, they have made some mistakes recently. Right, back to the article. But yes, no, I'm very happy with that quote there, because to me, the way they're talking about making a game is exactly the way that a game should be made, especially a smaller passion project, 2D indie game from a small team. Yeah, that they're going about it exactly the right way. So we jump right into another quote from Gibson. We're very fortunate that we have a development method that is so enjoyable, Gibson said. Not exactly sure how we stumbled into that. Everything comes together quickly. You can see results fast. Ideas turn into something that exists in the game almost immediately before your eyes, and that's very satisfying. And that allows you to go off on those tangents and meet weird characters because someone's offhandedly mentioned a weird character as an idea and the other person's laughed, and that's enough. Yeah. Okay. Well, firstly, I mean, he's being quite humble there and saying not exactly sure how we stumbled into that. I'll tell you how you did. Exactly what was said in the last paragraph, where they're talking about you design the core gameplay first, make sure that the character feels good, everything is slick, everything is in place. And then if you have an idea, you can implement it very, very quickly and just test, is it going to work with the core gameplay? Does it mesh with the core gameplay? And that's, if you listen to my part 1 when I was talking about the reactions to the demo and the fact that the demos that have been on the show floor are basically exactly the same as demos that were shown previously to journalists years ago, I think. And I said that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean that it hasn't improved since then. What it does mean is that they got everything 100% right. They were 100% confident in that. And all the time since then has not been trying to reinvent the wheel, trying to go back and fix what was broken. No, that was 100% sorted. So what they've been doing since then is going, right, so we've got the movement, we've got the combat, we've got the graphical style, we're 100% secure in all of that, we're really happy with all of that. Now, let's make cool shit to experiment with, let's make awesome levels and awesome worlds and awesome story ideas and awesome new characters and awesome new enemies to implement into that existing demo, right? So they had the core gameplay years ago. They knew it was right and they're confident in the fact that it's right. I mentioned Duke Nukem Forever as the polar opposite of that. They weren't confident in it and they kept restarting in new engines and they kept restarting with new teams. No, this is the opposite. They knew they were right the first time. They knew they were 100% in it. And then they've spent all these years just experimenting with, okay, we've got the core gameplay loop. Now, how do we make different environments, different story elements, different characters and see if it works? Brilliant. And then the whole it allows you to go off on those tangents, meet weird characters because someone's offhandedly mentioned a weird character as an idea and the other person's laughed and that's enough. Yeah, that gels with my experience with my own Metroidvania as well. I mentioned when talking about my own Metroidvania, it's not a solo dev project. Some of my games are solo dev projects. My Metroidvania is with essentially one other person and then a small team for things like voice acting and stuff like that. But yes, it's just myself and a partner making the game together. And but yeah, bouncing ideas off each other and just what makes each other laugh or what makes each other go, oh, that's cool. Or if I say something and then she gets inspired and says yes and then I listen to what she says and I go yes and it's like improv, isn't it? And that can be so inspiring if you're both on the same page. And that sounds exactly like what the two guys are doing here. So then the quote continues. New quote. Pellin is jumping in. You're always working on a new idea, new item, new area, new boss, Pellin said. That stuff is so nice. It's for the sake of just completing the game that we're stopping. We could have kept going. The downside of this methodology was that it could have lasted forever. I remember at some point I just had to stop sketching, Gibson said, because I went, everything I'm drawing here has to end up in the game. That's a cool idea, that's in. That's a cool idea, that's in. You realise if I don't stop drawing, this is going to take 15 years to finish. Yep. That's exactly what I just said about my own games as well, of like with the Metroidvania game. We were developing it. It was really, really cool. We got so many ideas. And then we realized, okay, no, this is going to be a franchise. This is going to be the first of potentially many games using this character and in this universe. But we need to be, okay, what's going to go in the first game and then what can go in the sequels or what can go in the spin-offs if the first game is good and if people like it and if it warrants making a second game and if we're still passionate about making a second game after we've spent all these years making the first one. But we realized that the Metroidvania game was going to, even if we went with the simple version, it was probably going to take us maybe 4 or 5 years to make. So we said, okay, well, let's make a simple game as well. And I made a kind of a simple solo project that I could develop by myself, thinking that I could get that one out first. But again, feature creep. And again, you start thinking of all kinds of cool ideas to add to it. And again, the skill is knowing when to stop and which features to say, yeah, that would be cool, but it's not necessary to be in the first game. The first game is still going to be cool even if I don't include that extra feature, but I can put that on the back burner and say that extra feature can maybe go in DLC that comes out 6 months later or a year later, or maybe can go in the sequel because it's just too big. And, you have to know, exactly like they did with Hollow Knight, you have to know what can go in the DLC or what to save for the sequel. So yeah, it sounds like they've reached exactly the same conclusion as I did. And again, I'm not comparing myself to them. Team Cherry are incredible and they've made one of the best games of all time. I'm not even slightly putting myself on the same level as that. I'm just saying it's nice that we've had the same kind of experience. I really empathize with what they're saying here. It really chimes and resonates with me. And, they are true artists, as I've said. And I just love everything about this. So the article continues. During the development of Hollow Knight, Gibson and Pellin frequently posted game updates and talked to players. Yes, they did. At the end of 2019, Team Cherry posted one more update about Silksong and then went silent, much to fans' dismay. We felt like continued updates were just going to sour people on the whole thing, Gibson said, because all we could really say is, we're still working on it. Yeah, I've found this with my own projects as well. I've been in the entertainment industry professionally for well over 25 years now. Well over 25 years. And working in all kinds of different projects, comics, movies, TV series, video games, music projects, albums. And I've found that it's a blessing and a curse when people are interested in your projects, but you really want your project to be good. And sometimes, the more people, if you announce a project too early, people get really, really excited about it, and then they keep asking you about it, and that adds more pressure. And the more pressure there is, the more you want the project to be really, really good, and the harder that you want to work on it to make it as good as it can be. And then, the project ends up getting delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed because you've got all this pressure to make it as good as it can possibly be. And people are just getting fed up with the fact that you announced it and they were looking forward to it, and now they feel disappointed, or they feel like it's never going to come out, or they feel like they've been lied to. This can be a vicious circle. And it was kind of unfortunate what happened with Silksong, in the sense of originally they thought it was going to be DLC for Hollow Knight, so they felt comfortable talking about it. And then they were like, oh, okay, no, this is going to be a separate game. But people already knew about it by that point, so they had to announce, no, this is going to be a separate game. As so then they carried on making updates, and then at some point they realized, oh, this is going to take a long time for us to get it exactly how we're happy with it. So they basically had to kind of go radio silent. And honestly, I think that was the right decision, because it's built this kind of mystery, and it's turned it into a meme of like everybody is waiting for it. And this is why it's the most wishlisted game. It's the game that became a meme that every time there was a new event, like a Gamescom or a Summer Games Fest or a Nintendo Direct or an Indie Direct or anything, people will be like, Silksong. So yeah, but it is kind of unfortunate, because this is something that I find very difficult to balance as well. Like sometimes I mention in my episodes, like I have in this one, sometimes I mention in my episodes, oh yeah, no, I'm working on this game, or oh, I'm working on this documentary, working on this superhero movie, working on this comic book, I've got an album coming out, and there's all kinds of things, working on a documentary. There's so many things, and it's like, yeah, but all of those projects are so important to me, and because I am in charge of most of them don't have a hard release date. I don't have to release them until I'm happy with them. And if I'm not happy with them, I don't have to release them, and I could cancel them at any point. I'm not the type of person to cancel something, but I am the type of person to delay something until I'm 100% happy with it. I won't put something out with my name on it unless I'm sure that it will reflect well upon me, and this is something that I'm proud to have my name attached. Doesn't mean that it has to get great reviews. Like, people might, critically pan it, and that's okay. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. But I don't want something out there with my name on it unless I'm proud of it. So, yeah, no, I completely empathize with what they're saying here. And although it has been frustrating for fans, and although it was a shame to suddenly go radio silent, and maybe they could have explained it a little bit better, of why they were going quiet. But yeah, no, I totally understand what they did and why. And I think that it was best for the game. Because can you imagine, really, if they were doing dev diaries like every week and show every time they made a new enemy, they were really proud of it and they showed it off. Every time they made a new area, they were really proud of it, they showed it off. Every time they come up with a new, funny little joke, they showed it in their Twitter feed, or they put it in a blog, right? Fans would have loved that along the way, but then by the time the game came out, there wouldn't be any surprises. You'd already know everything. I think it's better this way. They built up a real mystique, and they've really built up the hype for the game, and it really, everything here is telling me that the hype is going to be worth it and the wait is going to have been worth it. Right, the article continues. They wanted to be particularly cautious about avoiding spoilers. Yeah, exactly what I've just said. Much of the thrill of Hollow Knight came from accidentally stumbling upon secret passageways or breaking down walls to find hidden bugs. Yes, absolutely. Silksong has plenty of its own secrets that they didn't want to detail before the release. Yes, see, this is kind of the problem with doing dev diaries and things like this, and it's something I'm wondering about with my own games as well. Like there's so much that I want to show off and be like, look, here's a really cool feature, or here's why I'm really proud of this part of the game, this area of the game. Look, this typifies, look how many secrets there are, look how many hidden areas there are, look how much depth there is to this particular area, look at all these different moves and traversals, and look at all the branching skill paths, and look at all the random different dialogue that you can get from these different characters depending on when you talk to them, or what you do before you talk to them. It's look at this. And on the one hand, you want to show that off, to show how well programmed it is and how well designed it is, and how cool it all is. But on the other hand, it's so much cooler if the player can discover those things by themselves, right? But maybe different players will experience a completely different game because they discover different things and they don't discover different things. And where that becomes interesting, I think, is when a player maybe does a second playthrough, if they really like the game and they come back to it for a second time, and then they discover something that they didn't discover the first time, or suddenly a character has different dialogue and they realize, oh, this is randomized, or oh, this is now different because I did a different thing. And yeah, many players won't realize that. Many players will only play the game the first time and they'll never come back to it a second time, and they won't realize that actually there was 27 different possible things that NPC could have said to them at that moment that would have led in a different direction. They won't realize. But the ones that do realize, it's so much cooler if they can find that out by accident. And I think nowadays, if somebody really likes a game, if somebody really enjoys a game, often they'll replay it multiple times themselves, but often also they want to watch other people playing it. They want to watch people streaming it. They want to watch reviews and things. So even if they didn't realize, oh, I could get a different reaction, or oh, there's a hidden thing there that I didn't find before, they might watch somebody else playing it and then see that other person finds something that they didn't find. And for me, the more of that you can keep a secret, the better, the cooler. And again, this comes back to Miyamoto as well. Think about the original Zelda, the original Super Mario Brothers, and especially Super Mario Brothers 3 and Super Mario World. But even all the way back, like with the original Zelda and the original Super Mario Brothers, there's so much hidden stuff in those games. There's so many things that the players kind of will work out by themselves and will feel like that they've discovered something that nobody else knows, And then if you're a kid and you're playing that, you want to run up to your friends in the playground the next day and tell them this new thing that you've worked out, or this new thing that you found, and everything feels like a discovery for the first time. You don't want to, even though you as a designer and a programmer, when you're making these things, you feel like you've been very clever and you want to show it off to people, and dev diaries and things like, Twitter and blogs and stuff it's really tempting to just, every time you do something that you think is cool, it's really tempting to just show it off and go, hey, look how cool this thing is and think that it's going to be raising hype for the game. But in a way, it's so much more beautiful to have people just play the game and discover things for themselves, and different people having different experiences and discovering different things in different orders. Yeah, there's something so cool about that, especially in this kind of modern world on the internet where people can watch other people play games and see other people experiencing things for the first time. I think that's why YouTube has such a reaction culture of like, it's kind of crazy how much of YouTube is people watching other people watch movies for the first time, listen to songs for the first time, play a game for the first time. And I remember like when my son for the first time, was watching people playing Minecraft on YouTube and streaming, watching. And to begin with, I just didn't get it, because I was like, why are you watching somebody else play a game? Surely it's more fun to play the game yourself, I didn't. It took me a long time to understand, but nowadays I totally get it. If I've got a movie that I love, or a song that I love, or a game that I love, I absolutely love watching videos or streams of other people experiencing it for the first time. And I suppose it's like back in like when you're a little kid and you got something cool and you want to show it to your mates, or you want to show it to your mum, or you want to show it to your grandparents. So, it's like that, but suddenly you can show it with the world. And as a developer, you have the urge to show off your cool shit to other people. But if you can hold back on that, it's infinitely cooler if the players of your game are so excited about it that they want to share it with other people. So it's almost better to take a step back, even though you're the little kid who wants to show the drawing to his mum so she can hang it on the fridge. It's actually kind of better if you just, do the drawing, and then years later it gets discovered by some art historian, and suddenly it's getting shared by complete strangers and getting hung in a gallery. That's the equivalent. You don't want to just have it put on the fridge and only a handful of people experienced it. It's kind of better to let the world discover it, and if it's worth sharing with other people, people will discover it. I think a really good example of that recently is Animal Well. Animal Well is just such a beautifully designed game. And so much of the experience of that was players discovering things for themselves and talking about it with each other and sharing it with each other. And, I'm not even sure that 100% of that game has been discovered yet, and the creator of that game, forgive me, I can't remember their name, but the creator of that game, I don't think has officially come out and said, yes, people have discovered 100% of the secrets. It's, it's so cool. It's like uncovering hidden stuff. Okay, let's continue the article. Plus, they thought Silksong would be out much sooner. Yes. This hits all of us creatives. Anytime I'm working on a project, like in my head, I'm like, okay, if I work really hard on this, I can get it out in 6 months. And then, 6 years later, I'm still working on it. Instead of popping up and bugging people for the sake of it, it felt like our actual responsibility was just to work on the game, Pelham said. Probably at the time, we thought we'd go quiet for a year or two, and then the game would come out. Yes. Again, I've had this exact same experience. There's a couple of movie projects and things that some people, a small, tiny handful of people, but some people are actively angry with me that they've been waiting for so long and they feel like I haven't said something for such a long time. And I never intend to go silent for months or even years. I never intend that. But at the same time, like, you have a feeling of like, I don't want to put out an announcement until the announcement is ready, or until it feels justified. And if you put out too many announcements, all you actually do is you create more people who are excited and waiting and will keep asking for updates. So if you put out an update, instantly it creates more people who want updates. Whereas if you wait, sometimes it's better to put out a more substantial update when you've got more to show and you're closer to the release date. And sometimes what you think is going to be 6 months can turn into 2 years, 3 years. And it does annoy a handful of people, but sometimes it's actually safer to do that and you annoy less people. It's a very difficult balance, though. Very difficult balance. I completely empathize with what they're saying here. Okay. In 2020, as COVID disrupted most video game productions around the world, Adelaide was able to stave off the worst of the pandemic, going months without new cases, which allowed Gibson and Pelland to keep plugging along on Silksong. Seems a little odd knowing that the rest of the world has such a dramatic and isolating period, Gibson said. Here we were going to cafes and having brunch. I have quite a few friends who are, actors on movies and TV shows who are Australian. Australia and New Zealand, sorry, I know they don't like being lumped in with one another, but they are very kind of unique areas separated from the rest of the world and separated from each other. The way they experienced COVID in Australia was very, very different. And New Zealand almost had no COVID at all. And everybody was like, oh, that's because they managed it so well. Well, kind of, but it's also because they're so isolated and the way that their cities are all so separate from each other, hundreds or thousands of miles away from each other. And the communities are laid out differently and the buildings are laid out differently, and where tourists go and where tourists don't go. Yeah, it was just a lot easier for them to manage it. But yeah, I had a good few friends who I was speaking to in Australia during COVID, and they were just telling me, no, everything's still open here. Yeah, no, the kids are still going to school, and I'm still going to restaurants, and we can still work on things. And even when they went into a lockdown, it didn't need to be as long and it didn't need to be as strict. Whereas for me, as I said, I'd actually, even though I'm very lucky, my dad taught me to program when I was very, very young. So I've been developing games by myself since the 80s, since the mid 80s or mid to late 80s. But then I got out of the games industry. I was sort of professionally starting to get into it, in my late teens, and then I got out of the games industry for reasons that I mentioned before, but I got back into it during COVID because of the lockdowns. I was working on a very, very, very big superhero movie project and really excited for that. And then suddenly we were all ready to shoot. Everything was organized. We'd been preparing for absolutely years to start shooting this superhero movie. And then literally a week before we were meant to start shooting, boom, the world went into lockdown and everything changed and delays happened and companies went bust, and also the politics of the world changed and just everything changed after COVID. But during that lockdown period, I was like, okay, what can I do? What can we do? We can't work on this movie. And it was not to be flippant because, of course, millions of people died and it was terrible in many ways. But for me, it was almost kind of like a blessing in disguise because there are so many smaller little indie projects that I worked on, projects that I helped other people with, collaborating online and Zoom meetings with people that I would have never had a chance to talk to in real life because they suddenly had a lot more free time and they were bored and they were willing to work on projects if they could work remotely, and doing all kinds of things. And friends who were streaming, and we had so much fun hanging around on streams. But also, I got back into games dev because I thought this is something that I can do by myself in lockdown. And also, like I say, this friend that I'm developing the Metroidvania with, she was also in lockdown, and we were talking and we were bouncing ideas off each other, and cool. So I was getting back into game dev, and she was really into art and design and development and writing and voice acting, and I just thought, well, let's make a game together. And it was just such an awesome collaborative process, and it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for COVID. So it's really interesting how they had a similar but different experience. Where were we? Silksong briefly resurfaced in 2022, yes it did, during an Xbox event, which promised that all of the games shown would be out within a year. Yes, sore point. Xbox doubled down on Twitter saying that Hollow Knight's sequel would be out before June 2023. Press X to doubt. At the time, they all thought it was true. We did genuinely believe that was the case, Pelland said. There was a period of 2 to 3 years when I thought it was going to come out within a year. A period of 2 to 3 years when I thought it was going to come out within a year. Yeah, exactly. But the game kept growing. Silksong has more elaborate bosses than Hollow Knight. Yeah, we saw that in the trailer. Bloomin' heck. more than 40 bosses, and they looked incredible. So many, move sets and so many particles and cool graphical effects going on. They looked awesome. More gameplay systems and more interactivity. Gibson and Pelham wanted objects in the world to react to Hornet's various tools, which required a ton of drawing and animation work. Yes, because one thing that is so cool, and I'm not sure that I actually touched on this in part one, but I definitely want to talk about it now, is Hollow Knight. The graphics in Hollow Knight are hand-drawn, and I'm not sure about Silksong, but for certain with the first Hollow Knight, literally hand-drawn on paper and then scanned in. Not just hand-drawn using a Wacom tablet, so kind of digitally hand-drawn. No, hand-drawn literally on pen and paper and then scanned in. And it sounds like it's the same with this as well, at least for the initial designs, because, he said at some point I had to stop drawing. I was drawing and drawing and drawing, and at some point I had to stop drawing because everything I drew had to be included in the game because it was so cool. I've talked before in other episodes at length about how one of my big passions is animation, and I'm a traditionally trained animator. I trained for nearly 2 years. I always say 2 years, but actually it's just under 2 years. But I trained for just under 2 years with Don Bluth, incredible mentor to me, absolute genius. Lovely guy as well, by the way, and lovely family, and just amazing. Don Bluth, cannot speak highly enough about that man. Love him to death. And his work as well, obviously. I mean, yeah. Goes without saying, he has created and directed just some of the greatest animated films of all time. And, great figure in the games industry as well. Dragon Slayer and Space Ace, and basically creating QTEs and interactive movies. But also Richard Williams, God rest his soul, R.I.P., press F to pay respects. Incredible man that I was lucky enough to have some training with. And for those that don't know, he probably the most experienced animator of all time, or the animator with the widest skill set of all time. And he also won, I believe, to this day still, he's won more Oscars for animation than anybody else, because he was the director of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And if you don't know, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a film which basically said, what if cartoons were real? And what if all the actors in cartoons were real? And therefore, there's this alternate universe where Mickey Mouse lives in the same world as Bugs Bunny, lives in the same world as the Flintstones, and Yogi Bear lives in the same world as Betty Boop and Tom and Jerry, and anime characters, and just characters from every generation of animation and every style of animation, from every studio of animation, all are real organic creatures that live together and live in the same world. So he had to direct a film with all of those characters in all of those different art styles, even down to the fact that different ones are working on different amounts of frames per second. Some of them are on 1, some of them are on 2, some of them are using limited animation. And to have them all look authentic and feel authentic. So he interviewed and trained with and talked to all of the great animators, including ones who had retired, ones who had, animators from the 1920s who were practically on death's door, and some of them he talked with them, and then they were dead a month later. But before they died, they'd managed to pass on knowledge to him of how to best animate their characters the most authentically. So this guy basically studied every single style of animation, and I'm not saying that he managed to pass on all of that knowledge to me, absolutely not. But just to do training with that guy was incredible. So yeah, hand-drawn 2D animation is one of the things that I am the most passionate about, and it's so sad that nowadays it's basically a dead art form. Almost nobody knows how to do it, and certainly even the people who do know how to do it, it's basically impossible to get funding to make a fully 2D animated movie nowadays. And when you do see them, they're really not the traditional Disney style pencil and paper animation. I'm thinking about we've just had Fixed, which has come out, which is technically an original 2D animated film. And yes, the animation does look really nice, but it's not It's not full traditional 2D animation a la the classic Disney movies and things like that. It's still vastly simplified when compared to that. It's a lot closer to the 2D animation that we see for TV series. And that's no offense to the art style of the film. It's great art style. It looks like the animation is really good, but still, it's not to the same level. But Silksong is fully hand-drawn animation, and it looks gorgeous. It looks amazing, and it's done really, really beautifully, really well. So yeah. I mean, they're talking about, every time they had a new idea, every time they had a new thing they wanted to implement, every time they had a new character. I mean, it said in the trailer that there's over 200 unique enemy creatures, and that's just the enemies, let alone the NPCs to interact with, and So every time they implement a new thing, they test it in the gameplay. Does it work? Yeah. Is it cool? Yeah. Do we want to implement it? Yeah. And they've already said that they had to force themselves to stop coming up with new ideas because they had so many ideas and they were all so cool. But yeah, each new idea, once you've decided to implement it, it then requires a ton of drawing and animation work. And when you're talking about traditional 2D hand-drawn animation frame by frame, you're not talking about vectors with tweening and automatic animation. No, you're talking about real hand-drawn frame by frame animation. That is a huge amount of work. I mean, that's a huge amount of work for a Disney movie where you have 500 animators. That is an inordinate amount of work for essentially kind of 2 or 3 people working by themselves by hand. So yeah, I'm not surprised it's taken this many years. I think we're always underestimating the amount of time and effort it will take us to achieve things, Gibson said. I could tattoo that on my arm. It applies to everything that I do myself, even this podcast itself. Every time I have an idea for an episode or whatever, I'm always thinking, oh yeah, I'll make a quick episode on that. Yeah, I don't need to write a script. I can just talk about this. Oh yeah, it'll take me like half an hour to quickly talk about it, maybe half an hour to edit it, maybe, an hour to upload it. And then it ends up taking a week for the episode to be out. And that's just exponential when it comes to anything that requires artwork, anything that, especially animation. Yeah, if you're an artist and if you're a perfectionist and if you coming up with the cool ideas that inspire you is the easy part. And you always, at the time when you're kind of hyped up and you're almost in a manic creative episode of thinking, yeah, this is going to be amazing, and I'm going to work hard and I'm going to do it, and yeah. And then everything takes longer than you think it's going to. So yeah, let's read that quote again. And I just want to emphasize how true this is. And it's not just me. Every person in the creative industry that I speak to says exactly the same thing. Don't forget, like I said, I've been in the entertainment industry professionally for well over 25 years. I have spoken to probably thousands of writers, directors, producers, creators, actors, artists, pop stars, everything. Thousands over the years. Especially as I go to a lot of award shows and things, and you end up hanging around afterwards, getting drunk with some random actor, random producer, random director, random singer, random guy from a band. And yeah, everybody would agree with the same thing, but it's difficult to explain to members of the public who don't do this type of work, because it seems like things should be easy. Or if you've said that you think something's going to take a year, people take you on your word. And you genuinely do mean it at the time. It's not that you're lying. It genuinely feels to you that it's going to take a year, and then it ends up taking 5. And people think you're being lazy. No, you've been working crazy hard for that entire time. And it's just, this is how creative things work. And this is why so many people in the creative field hate AI and hate the public getting hold of AI and just going, oh, I've come up with an idea for a picture. There you go. I've come up with an idea for a song. There you go. I've come up with an idea for a website or an app, or there you go. And it's instant, but there's no soul to it, and there's no, and what's frustrating is some of it is good. It's getting to the point where some AI created art is good and some AI created music is good, and it's just like, oh God. But they're losing the entire creative process. But there is something beautiful in that creative process, because while you might think that something's going to take 6 months to make, and actually it takes 6 years. Within that 6-year period, you have honed and polished and crafted to the minutest detail. And you have put so much of yourself and your life, your blood, sweat and tears into making something that is so uniquely you and such an artistic expression of yourself and your values and your ideas and your life and your heart and soul. This is why something that is AI, that you might have a cool idea and then you click your fingers and then it's there. And technically it looks good and technically it looks cool, but there's something missing from it. What is missing is the soul. And sometimes that soul takes 6 years when you thought it was going to take 6 months. It's just the way it is. So the quote again, I'm going to read it again. I think we're always underestimating the amount of time and effort it will take us to achieve things, Gibson said. It's also that problem where because we're having fun doing it, it's not like it's taking longer, this is awful, we really need to get past this phase. It's, this is a very enjoyable space to be in. Let's perpetuate this with some new ideas. Oh, I'm laughing because this is exactly myself and my friends when we're working on these projects. I mean, I mentioned a superhero movie. That particular superhero movie that was delayed because of COVID, I mentioned in my Batman video where I was talking about, I talked about some behind the scenes stuff from the superhero movie industry, and I said that I was talking with Paul Franklin, who was the visual effects supervisor of the Dark Knight trilogy, and it was him who actually kind of encouraged me to make my own superhero movie in the first place. And I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe that we had that first discussion back at the Guardian newspaper in 2014. I think it was around the same time as Russell Brand released his book on politics, revolution or revolution or whatever it was, you know, with love in the title. Because I remember I talked to Russell Brand on the same day or maybe the day before. I'm not really trying to name drop. I'm just trying to add some perspective here. I think it was 2014 when he first suggested that I make that movie. And I was so inspired after our meeting that I ran away and wrote the script. And the first draft of the script was written within a month. And I sent it to people at Marvel and people at DC and people who were working at Fox at the time, who, you know, Fox were producing the X-Men movies that hadn't been bought by Disney at that point. And I just sent it to everybody I knew who worked in superhero movies. And I said, I've written this script and Paul Franklin told me to write it. What do you think? And yeah, it became this kind of indie project, but a really big indie project with lots of people from big Hollywood stuff helping out because everyone thought it was a cool idea. And we all started, you know, brainstorming and yeah, it wasn't until 2020 when that movie was going to be made. So that was, 6 years. And then because of COVID, everything got delayed and everything got slowed down. And then I have purposely delayed the movie now because I feel like the world has changed so much because of everything that has happened after COVID and all the political stuff that's been going on and all the world changes. And so I was like, okay, I think we need to change some of the scope of this. So people wouldn't like it as much as we thought because the world is different now. So we need to reinvent it. We need to go back to the drawing board. So yeah, but again, that is the beauty of having an independent project and being in charge of it, because I don't have, you know, Disney or Paramount or Universal leaning down my neck and saying, hey, we invested 20 million in your film and you promised us it would be out by this day. No, because it's an independent movie, but with Hollywood people working on it, but an independent movie that I'm in charge of and it's my IP, I don't have to release the movie until I'm ready to release the movie, you know? So I can make the announcement when I want to make the announcement. And as I said earlier in this episode, it's very important to know when to make an announcement. And you notice I often mention I'm working on a superhero movie, but I don't say what it is. Because again, I'm waiting to make the announcement until I'm sure when the release date will be. And right now it's a case of I think it's a good idea to actually wait until we're 100% right, you know. So yeah, a project that you think is going to take 6 months can take 6 years. And often, well, it's like what Miyamoto said about, you know, a delayed game can be eventually good, whereas a rushed game is bad forever, you know. And I think that's the same with any artistic project. Okay, let's continue with the article. The longer development lasted, the more pressure Gibson and Pellon felt to ensure that everything was as fine-tuned as possible. They'd already spent 4 years on it. Why would they rush now? The more time they spent polishing some parts, the more time they needed to apply it consistently across the rest. Yes, I said this earlier, or maybe it was in part 1, I can't remember, but yeah, I said this. This is kind of the problem of like the longer you delay something, but people know that it's coming, the more pressure that you feel to make it absolutely perfect. And also, the more you polish up one area, and it's really, really cool and even better than you imagined it could be, suddenly that means that the rest of the game suddenly feels unpolished and you feel like you need to go back and add to it, you know? I've had that multiple times with my games of where I thought I was happy with the graphics, or I thought, and then, I need to draw something new, and then I draw the new thing, and then I look at it and I go, wow, I did such a good job, but now that one element looks better than all the other elements. So I have a choice. Do I take that one new element that I've just drawn and I'm really proud of and redraw it and make it look worse so that it matches the old assets? Or do I take all the old assets and redraw them all again, even though I was happy with them, but redraw them all again to match the new asset? And it's the same with movies when I'm working on them. If a certain visual effect is much better than all the other visual effects, it kind of makes you want to go back and re-edit all the old visual effects to make them match the standard of the new one, And when you have a project that runs over, say, 5 years, yeah, it's quite natural that you're going to get better at producing visual effects, or that technology is going to get better. Or ironically, something like AI or whatever can actually help you in order to improve something like, I don't know, facial replacement or with AI and get a better result than the result that you spent absolutely ages slaving over making a CGI face before, and now actually it's easier to use AI and replace it and it'll look better. And then you kind of go, okay, now do I go back and apply the same thing to all the previous visual effects shots that we've already made, or do we just use it on all the new visual effects shots moving forward? It's these, as a creative person, you're constantly juggling these decisions all the time. So I'm laughing when I'm reading this article because part of me is like, is this new information? Are members of the public going to read this and go, oh, wow, I didn't know creative things were like this? Because, I mean, to me, it's like, yeah, this is how every creative endeavor is, yeah. But yeah, it's really cool for me to have a chance to talk about this. So I know I'm talking about myself and my own experiences a lot, but I hope that this is giving some context and people are interested. And certainly Mr. Jason Schreier, you can't sue me, or Bloomberg can't sue me for reading your article, because I am adding so much context to this. This is definitely fair use. So throughout development, Team Cherry remained tiny, which may have extended the production time, but also saved them from the slog of having to manage and delegate. Yes, so much yes. We don't want to mess with the formula and then find out it's not fun, Gibson said. I used to manage teams in past lives. I don't really want to do that ever again. Yeah. See, when I've produced a lot of movies over the years, and sometimes they're entirely independent, sometimes they're ones that I funded myself, sometimes they're ones that I've raised funding from private investors, other times it's because a production company has come to me with a certain amount of money and said, we need you to make a movie. And sometimes I've made movies where it is literally just me and maybe 5 people, and we do all the jobs of everything ourselves. And other times, especially when a big company has come with a lump sum of money, they'll say, we need it by this date. We're giving you this amount of money. You need to justify to us how you're spending that money. And they start very quickly telling me, we want you to hire a bigger team. We want there to be 300 people working on it. Okay? And they think that that's going to speed up the process. And in some ways it does, but in other ways it doesn't, because inevitably a lot of that work is not going to be how I wanted it or how I envisioned it, because if we're outsourcing too much, these are people who aren't fully involved with the project and haven't been involved with the project since inception, so they aren't 100% on the same page. And maybe you could say that's on me for not explaining it properly, but fair enough in a way. But it does make it very difficult. And sometimes you can spend such a long time explaining to somebody how to do something, or fixing the problems of what somebody else did, or just doing 90% of the work in the first place to be able to show that person, yes, that's what I want now, just finish it off. It can end up feeling like it might be quicker if you do it yourself, and almost certainly you'll get a better result if you do it yourself. So but also you don't want to be, no man is an island, and you don't want to be so cocksure and so arrogant that you think you are the only person to be able to do it right. That's obviously not the case. You can hire brilliant people and brilliant visionary people who can come in and shake up the project and make it 100 times better than it would have been if it was just me by myself. But it's knowing who to bring in and what to bring them in for. And often, if you have a smaller team, but every single person on that team is picked for an exact reason and knows their exact role, and everybody is working together as a finely tuned machine, can actually end up being more efficient and getting a better result than an enormous team that is difficult to manage. I mean, people often talk about how big the budgets are for AAA games and how big the budgets are for Hollywood studios. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. I know people who work on AAA games and have been involved on the periphery of AAA games, and I've absolutely worked on many blockbuster movies and been on set for many blockbuster movies. And I'm telling you right now, every single one of those projects is hemorrhaging money and wasting tens of millions that don't need to be spent, because there are many people there who don't need to be there. Now, I know some people will argue, creating jobs is good and having jobs is good. Yes. I am quite left-wing in my politics, and I really hate the whole, corporations firing thousands of people. Yes. But I would much rather that those thousands of people were actually, having real creative input and making projects where they could show their full potential. So, yeah, when I'm saying there's 1,000 people working on a AAA game and actually it should be 100, I'm not saying fire 900 of them. I'm saying split them into 10 teams of 100 people making a game. Or 100 teams of 10 people making passionate indie games that they care about. That would be so much better than you hire thousands and thousands of people, but some of those people are doing very little work and have very little creative input. And even if they are the most talented, the most passionate people, because they have such little say, the finished result might end up being bad. And that is definitely the case on Hollywood movies. I've been on sets of Hollywood movies and seen people getting paid $100 an hour, and they turn up at 4 o'clock in the morning because that's what it said on their call sheet, and they're still there at 11 o'clock at night, and they've just been sitting drinking cups of coffee waiting to be called, and they've done nothing. And then it gets to like 11:30 and some assistant comes up to them and absolutely apologizes and says, we're so sorry, we're so sorry, we're going to need you back tomorrow, we're so sorry, we haven't got time for you today. And that extends to hundreds of people. So when you multiply that by hundreds of people per day for months, including reshoots and all kinds of things, it's no wonder that these movies cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet independent people making similarly ambitious movies with a smaller team and everybody knowing exactly their role and everything is planned out more efficiently, things run to schedule, there are less surprises, less necessity for reshoots, and you can make a very, very similar movie for much, much less money. And it's the same with games. And this is why indie games often end up being higher quality and produced on a shoestring. But it's also why what you think is going to take 6 months can end up taking 6 years. Exactly as they're saying here. Everything in this article is just so true. Staying small also meant eschewing the production practices commonplace at many game development studios. What is Jira? Gibson asked when I asked if they use the task management application. Jira. I'm laughing because I don't know what Jira is. I don't use task management applications. I have been in this industry for so long that I started planning things out on squared paper and sticking sticky notes on a wall, and storyboarding and moving things around and having big filofaxes. And frankly, if that's good enough for Disney, that's good enough for me now. So yeah, I have no need for task management applications. I have many notepad text documents, and I have many actual folders and bits of actual paper. And this is how I stay organized. What is Jira or Jira? Gibson said when I asked if they used the task management application. Is it a software? Pelin said, adding that they'd briefly used Trello before their account was deactivated because they didn't use it enough. Yes, I tried Trello as well, and I was like, do you know what? I don't need this. It's one of those things, if somebody told me that I should be using it, so I downloaded it, I tried it out, and I was like, I don't need this. I'm more efficient doing things my own way and the way that I've always done it. That's funny. As development dragged on, the hype for Silksong grew more feverish. Perhaps the biggest reason Silksong took so long was that Team Cherry never had to worry about the one thing that keeps other independent developers awake at night: money. Yes. Yeah. I said this before when I was talking about my predictions, and when I said why I predict, before I watched the trailer and before I read this article, I just predicted why it had been delayed. And I said, look, part of the reason why it's been delayed for so long, and they seem quite laissez-faire about it, they don't seem to care, is because they have the infinite money glitch. They made Hollow Knight independently on a shoestring budget that they didn't even fund themselves. It was Kickstarter funded. They asked for something like 35,000 Australian dollars, which is, what's that, like 20,000 US dollars, I think. That's what they asked for, and they ended up getting like double that. So double what they asked for. They have a team of like 5 people. So that was more than enough to develop the game. And then once the game came out, they've sold 15 million copies, and they consistently sell more and more and more copies. They could, like I said about Notch, they could retire for the rest of their lives. They never have to work again. They're not creating Silksong because they need the money. They're creating Silksong for the pure love of the art and the enjoyment of the artistic process because they want to. So, of course, they're not under financial pressure to release it now. And because they don't have a grand publisher financial team breathing down their neck going, hey, we've got shareholders to make happy. We've promised them the game will be out by the 3rd quarter of... Because they don't have that. They can just release it when they want to release it. Right? So yeah. And again, like I've said, this is one of the big strengths about being independent. But yeah, they've just raised a point which is very important. I should have said this earlier, and maybe there were people getting very angry at me and will have left angry comments saying that I'm just being too idealistic about art, and yeah, but what about money? What are people supposed to live off? Oh yeah, it's all very well to say a project's ready when it's ready, and but okay, how do we pay the bills in the meantime? Yeah, okay. I am very lucky that I am in the position of being in the entertainment industry for a long time and having a lot of strings to my bow, having worked on a lot of brilliant projects over the years. I don't want anybody to think that I'm super rich or super famous or successful. I'm not. But I am lucky enough that I can delay a project, and I don't have to worry about, if I delay that project, then I'm not going to be able to eat. That's not the case. So yeah, but I'm sure I'm not as rich as the people who made Hollow Knight. Absolutely not. But I do have the luxury of being able to delay a project, and also I separate projects very tightly. Like with this podcast, for example, if people are so kind as to donate, to buy me a coffee or to join my Patreon or whatever, I don't need that money to live off. But what I do is I ring fence that money for the project. I'm like, oh, these people have very kindly donated to this podcast because they like this podcast. So any money that I make from this podcast, I put back into the podcast for buying software that I need for it, for buying games to review, any equipment that I need for the podcast or whatever. That is what people will be donating to. They won't be donating to feeding my cats, because I can afford to feed my cats by itself. But if somebody is so kind as to donate to me, this is why I don't e-beg. This is why I'm not like, my mother's ill and I need to pay her medical bills. I don't talk about stuff like that on the podcast, because I don't want people donating to me because they feel sorry for me. If people are funding the podcast, they're funding the podcast. And it's the same with my games. When my games are announced, if people pre-order my games, they will be funding more games being made. And yes, I will take, a percentage of the profits as my salary, in inverted commas, from that, because it's a much larger thing than this podcast. But in general, the money from the games will go to fund making more games. I reinvest, just as I do with my movies. If a movie does well, I don't go and buy a Lamborghini. I put that money into making more movies. So that I don't need to rely on a Hollywood studio to give me money to make a movie. I use the profit from the last movie to make the next one. And it allows me, as they've said in this interview, it's really fun to have these creative projects and to feel like you have a creative outlet. So I think managing money and ring fencing it is really, really important. But again, I don't mean to be flippant when I say that an artist making a project is only a true artist if they don't release it until they're... No, if their only source of income is making an indie game and they have to release it by a certain date so that they can afford to pay their bills, and maybe it's got some bugs, or maybe they need to add some patches later down the line. But if that's the only way for that project to be made and for them to continue to eat or pay their rent, obviously that's what they should do. So I'm not trying to be judgmental or have a purist attitude towards these things, but yeah, obviously it's a luxury if you have the luxury to make the art that you want to make, and I'm lucky to be in that position. The developers of Hollow Knight, Team Cherry, are very much in that position. During the production of Hollow Knight, they'd stayed lean, sometimes living off leftover triangle sandwiches that their office neighbour would bring them after meetings. My dad would sometimes pop in and give me $20, Gibson said, and I'd be like, oh, I'm having a coffee today. That's cute, because that is, that's how I've been in the past in certain projects, with my mum coming along and saying, hey, what are you doing? Are you eating right? Are you making sure you're getting enough sleep? Are you, whatever? And I'll be saying, oh yeah, I'm just working on this. Oh, yeah, okay. And then she'd, see that I was, working really hard and I was saving my money, and I didn't want to spend money on other things because I was reinvesting it into the project. And she'd just, give me 20 quid and say, take the kids, go to the pub and buy a meal for you and the kids or something like that, and it would be like a real treat, because I wouldn't have paid that $20 myself. If it was my own $20, I would have invested it into the project that I was working on at the time. So yeah, it's very sweet to read that, and I'm sure that they are now no longer in the position where their dad needs to sometimes pop up and give them $20. Thanks to their first game's massive financial success, Gibson and Pellan no longer have to scrounge leftovers. Yes, exactly. For Pellan, who has 2 kids and a third on the way, wow, that's provided an inestimable peace of mind. Inestimable. Is that a word? You can estimate, right? You estimate. Inestimable would be a word, but it doesn't say that. It says inestimable. Okay, that is a new word for me, but I'm assuming it's correct. Sorry. It has provided peace of mind. Yes, obviously. Yeah, as I said, 2 kids of my own. They're all grown up now. But yeah, there were times when my kids were young, and we seemed to have found an infinite money glitch, and everything was great, and we were going on amazing holidays, and we didn't have to worry about anything. And there were other times when I was literally prioritizing, okay, my kids can eat, ups and downs like that. And what you learn very quickly is what you need to do is, when you have more money than you need, you don't buy a Lamborghini. You put it away for the times when you don't have money coming in. And yeah, maybe I learned that too late, but you do eventually learn that when you're in this industry, especially when you're reliant on yourself, because when you're doing these artistic projects, you don't have a guaranteed source of income. It's not like when you're in a job and you know exactly how much money you're going to get paid every month, But it is better in a way because you're reliant on yourself and you can't fire yourself. So, yeah, it might feel very secure to be in a job and know how much money you're getting paid every month, whatever. Yeah, but you don't know that you're not going to get fired. Whereas if you're working for yourself, you kind of feel like you're building your future. That's the illusion that we have for ourselves anyway. Anyway, for Gibson, who said he spends most of his time at the office, it hasn't changed much. I live in a very basic 2-bedroom apartment, he said. Sometimes I think, what would be better is a 1-bedroom apartment, because then there's even less to maintain. It's funny how many super creative, super genius people that I know who say the exact same type of things. And as I said, again, I don't want to name drop, or I don't want to make it sound like, I have this super glamorous life, because I don't. But occasionally I go to, big award ceremonies in the film industry and things like this, and you end up, afterwards all hanging around, there's free drinks and everything, and suddenly people are very open and want to talk to you, or are quite willing to talk to you, even if usually they would be not able to, because they're too busy or they're too important or whatever. And you would be amazed the amount of people who you would assume are multi-millionaires, and they almost certainly are, but you would assume that they're living in these massive mansions and they have these lavish lifestyles. And it turns out that all they actually did once they got rich was they bought their old childhood home, or they bought their mum a home, or if they were in like a council flat, they just bought the council flat. And they still live where they always lived. And some of them still drive the car that they always drove. And they don't feel the need to be like, oh, I'm rich, therefore I need to live like a stereotypical rich person. Often the money just gives peace of mind. And for the best of them, in my opinion at least, is they go, okay, how can I use this money to make other people's lives easier? What can I donate to? What foundation can I form? Can I start producing other projects that's going to create jobs for other people? Or, what am I passionate about? To some extent, I've had the experience where there's been times in my life, especially when I was much, much younger, where I suddenly got huge lump sums of money and I felt like, oh my God, I'm rich. And it was like winning the lottery. And I'd be like, oh my God, I always wanted to buy a Rolex, or, oh my God, I always wanted to drive this car, or I always wanted to live in this huge house, or whatever. Right. And you feel like this is what rich people are supposed to do. And you find out it doesn't make you happy. If anything, it makes you depressed. And you find it doesn't make you have friends either. You might have some false friends who hang around with you for a while because, they want to leech off whatever you're giving away. But these people, it actually alienates people around you because, your old friends feel like you've changed and they don't want to be around you. And your new friends aren't really new friends. They're just people who like you for your money or like you for what you're doing. So many people very quickly realize that once money gets past a certain level, it no longer helps you. So the best thing to do is to use it to help other people, right? Now, again, I'm not being flippant. Obviously, the majority of the people in the world are living paycheck to paycheck. The majority of people in the world, if you could just give them $1,000, it would change their life right now. Maybe they could pay off their credit card. Maybe they wouldn't have to worry about rent for the next month. Maybe whatever it is, they could fix the washing machine that they need to fix. They could pay their schooling, whatever it is that they need to do. Just a comparatively small amount of money would fix their lives. Yes, okay. $100,000 would fix even more in their life. $1 million would probably be amazing. $100 million would cause more problems than it's worth. And you don't get exponentially happier the more money that you have, once you get to the point where you've got so much money that you don't need it. Right? And if you've got a small team and they've made a small team of like 5 people and they've made a game that has sold 15 million copies, plus merchandise, plus everything else, they're not going to need to worry about money as long as they live within their means, as long as they don't go, okay, I'm a millionaire now, so I'm going to move to Beverly Hills and I'm going to rent a massive mansion. Because, by the way, you can't buy a Beverly Hills mansion, you have to rent them, and it's going to cost me $200,000 a month to rent this, and, you know, I'm going to buy a new Bugatti for $1 million, but then I'm going to find out that actually they break down if you're just driving them every day and taking them to the supermarket. So I need to buy a new $1 million Bugatti every 2 years. And I can't suddenly not have a Bugatti, because then that looks like people will notice that I don't have the Bugatti anymore. And I'm going to buy a $10,000 suit. Okay, but I've gone to an award ceremony and somebody's photographed me in that $10,000 suit. So now for the next award ceremony, I need to wear a different $10,000 suit. And if I wear a $1,000 suit, people are going to think that I'm poor now. And these are the kind of conversations which celebrities have in their own head, and it messes them up. And this is why so many of them end up dying bankrupt, even though they used to get paid $10 million per movie. It's a crazy situation, and it's a real trap. And the best way, if you become successful, the best way is just to avoid that in the first place, and just don't. If you have suddenly a load of money that you weren't expecting to have, just pretend that you don't have it, but carry on living the same way that you were living, but don't worry about bills anymore. And if somebody that you know or you love or you care about is having some problems, help them out. And if there's something that you're passionate about and something that you want to do it. But yeah, he's still living in his 2-bedroom apartment, and actually he thinks he might be happier in a 1-bedroom apartment because then he has less to worry about. The game has continued to generate revenue by reaching new players, perhaps in large part due to the Silksong buzz. Yes, perhaps. When the studio announced Silksong in February 2019, Hollow Knight had sold 2.8 million copies. Wow. The game has sold another 12 million copies since then, allowing Team Cherry to keep working on the sequel indefinitely without having to worry about running out of funds. Yes, that's exactly what I said. We're very lucky in that regard, Gibson said. I don't ever really think about it that much. Maybe that's the privilege of it. Yes, it is. That's exactly what I just said. As the years went on, the hype kept building. A Reddit forum dedicated to the game filled up with nonsensical blabber and made-up tweets, which users called silk posts, a variation on the expletive. Meanwhile, chat sections for video game live streams and Nintendo Direct events were plagued with the same feral messages repeated over and over again. Silksong when? Yes, I've talked about this and I've joked about this in various episodes. Gibson and Pellin tuned it all out, rarely going online. It's the best way. I've left social media, again, I've said this before. You won't find me on most social media. And also, this is why on the podcast, even though I do talk about my personal and my work life, and some people have worked out who I am, but I don't actively say what my full name is, and I certainly don't link to my old social network accounts and things. I worked out a long time ago it was much better for my mental health to stay offline. I was on Reddit and I accidentally made a post and it went viral and it got like 3 million views overnight and like 32,000 comments, and suddenly it was impossible for me to use Reddit anymore, because every time I would comment on anything unrelated, not talking about my own career, there would be somebody who has decided to watch my account and they'd just suddenly pop in and start asking me questions about Star Wars or whatever, and I'm just like, I can't use this account anymore. I need an anonymous account because it's impossible. And yeah, Twitter and Instagram, and it's just not good for my mental health, because once people know that you have a job, they're interested in your work. It's an absolute privilege Don't get me wrong, it's an absolute privilege to have fans or to have people who are interested in your work and to have supporters. It's an absolute privilege. And on this little channel, where I have a small audience and I've just hit 1,000 subscribers, and I'm really grateful for that, I get a very small, very manageable amount of comments, and I love it. And I make sure to like and respond to every single comment that I get. But yeah, on something like Twitter, absolutely impossible, because people know me from some big movies that I've worked on and some big celebrities that I'm friends with and some big music artists that I've worked with in the past and things like this. So it becomes very difficult for me to just talk about something small or just make a small little thing, because people will want to ask me something about something unrelated that's, or people want to drag me into drama if a certain actor that I've been photographed with at some point in the past suddenly has some controversy. People want statements out of me or whatever, and I'm just like, no. I'm staying offline, and my private life is my private life, and nobody will ever see photos of my children, and nobody will ever know anything about my love life or my private life, anything like that. The closest you might get is I might show my cats on a video. That's about it. So yeah, Gibson and Pellin tuned it all out, rarely going online. They say they never read comments on YouTube or Reddit, though occasionally friends or family would send them some of the funniest ones. Yeah, I get that too. Somebody will send me a random Star Wars meme or something that somebody has posted. It's nice that people are passionate about the game and that they've obviously formed their own strange or very exciting communities around it, Gibson said. It feels like we're going to ruin their fun by releasing the game, Pellin said. Yeah, a little bit. There's kind of fun in anticipating and guessing, and in a way, it could be that some people are going to be disappointed when the game comes out, not because it's not good. It's going to be absolutely excellent. It's going to be one of the best games of all time, I have no doubt. But also, it can't possibly be as good as some people have built it up in their head to be. There's going to be some people who are disappointed no matter how good it is, And I feel like that with my own projects. Like every time I mention, I do mention on these episodes fairly often, I'm working on this game and I'm working on this project, I'm working on this movie, or I'm making my own Metroidvania, I'm making my own whatever. And every time I do, I'm slightly loath to do so, because I feel like there's going to be some people who build up an idea in their head of what it's going to be like, and then when I finally do announce these things, or when I finally do show them, people are going to be disappointed because it's not what they imagined it was going to be. It's living in the world online. It's a very strange thing, isn't it? It's, as an artist, it's a wonderful thing because you get to potentially have a much bigger audience than ever would have been possible in the past. And as an independent creator, it's a wonderful thing because you don't have to rely on major studios or major record labels or major producing partners and things anymore. You can just make what you want to make and put it out there, and the internet allows you to be potentially one of the most successful games or movies or musicians of all time just because of something that you made in your bedroom. And that's incredible. That is amazing. But it's also terrifying to open yourself up to the adoration and also the criticism of the entire world all at the same time, doesn't it? Once in a while, people would show up at the Team Cherry office, sometimes with their children, perhaps hoping for a Willy Wonka-type experience. Inevitably, they were disappointed by what they found instead. It's a grubby room with cardboard boxes, Gibson said. Yeah, I've often said that myself. Thankfully, this isn't a problem that I have now, but I have been doxxed a few times in the past, and people would randomly turn up to my house expecting me to invite them in, and then expecting me to have all kinds of, cool movie props and things to show them. And A, that wasn't going to happen, and B, my life is nowhere near as exciting as they imagine it's going to be. But also, when people have asked to visit film studios and things, I used to own and run literally a film studio. And as I sometimes say, right now I'm in France and we're building a little small independent film studio here. We're renovating an old building in the French countryside. A film studio is not what people imagine it's going to be. And a game studio is the same, but even more so. A game studio is basically just a room with computers in it. And a film studio is basically a room with computers in it and a much larger room like an aircraft hangar, and everything is concrete or everything is painted green. And that's about it. It's not glamorous like people think. It's not interesting like people think, The glamorous thing is the finished product. Their walls remain the same dull avocado color that they were when Team Cherry moved in more than 1 decade ago. They never put up art. They've been too busy making the game. In early 2025, Gibson and Pellan began to see the finish line and started making plans to release the game in the fall. Players desperate for information devoured every scrap of news, like the announcement that it would be playable at a museum in September, hoping this might finally be the year. Both Nintendo Co. and Microsoft Core's Xbox said during live events this year that Silksong was planned for 2025, but fans were cautious. They'd been down this road before. Yes, even when I was reacting to the teaser trailer, when Jeffrey was talking about it, I said, press X to doubt. I was kind of joking because I knew that we'd been told we were getting a release date. And I thought, well, if we get a release date and it's anytime soon, then it must be finished. But if we get a release date and it's like 6 months in the future, or especially like more than 6 months, like a year in the future, if we get, here's a release date, but it's a year in the future, I was still going to be like, yeah, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. But the fact that we've got a release date and it's in like 2-3 weeks time, no, it's finished, it's coming out. Okay, we can be certain now. But before then, before we had that release date, I was still press X to douse. Meanwhile, Team Cherry kept working. The shape of the game has been finalized for a while, Pellan said. The last year or two has been all about the details, adding small encounters, polishing everything and tying it all together. Yeah, I said that. This is exactly what I predicted had been happening. I've been sure that all these delays were not because they didn't know how the game was going to be or they were still scrambling around trying to make it work. No, I was sure that it had basically been finished for at least a year, if not more. But what they're doing is polishing the tiny little details, but it's the little details that make the difference. It's the difference between an A-tier game and an S-tier game. It's the difference between an 85% and a 99%, isn't it? And that's what made Hollow Knight special, and that is what I confidently predict is going to make Silksong exceedingly special. And they're still working to finalize things until the last possible minute. As we spoke, with Silksong a little more than 3 weeks out, I spotted programmer Jack Vine in the background tweaking code for one of the game's console ports. Yes, console ports. This is something that I have got into fairly recently. It's a new world for me, making a game and simultaneously working on the PC and the PlayStation and the Xbox and the Switch, and now the Switch 2 versions all at the same time. Having them all in parallel this is a new experience for me. This is something that I've never done before, but I'm trying to do with all of my current games. And I've built a kind of unifying engine that all of my current games are being built in the same engine, even though they're different genres. It's the same engine that allows for certain tech for graphics and controls and easy porting between the consoles. But easy is very much in inverted commas. Nothing is ever easy. And as we said earlier, everything takes longer than you expect. Gibson and Pellan say they're happy that the game is finally coming out, and even happier that they will get to keep working on it, which they still find enjoyable even after 7 years. That's nice to hear. They haven't burnt out or shown any desire to take a break. Instead, they're already making big plans to add extra content to Silksong in the months to years to come. Oh my god. Yeah, I know the feeling. Yes. When my games come out, they won't be finished. I already have DLC planned, and I already have sequels planned for the first 2 of my games to release. So as soon as that game is released, it's not finished, because I'm sure people will find bugs and will give me things that I have to fix. But also, I have DLC planned, I have sequels planned. It is the same with my movies as well. Like, I talk about the superhero movie, but the whole thing is, if that superhero movie does well, there's a sequel, there's a prequel, there's spin-offs within the same universe, there's comic books, there's video games, there's potential TV series, potential animation. Once you make something nowadays, it's basically a franchise, isn't it? If it's successful, then people will want more. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's amazing if you can make something that becomes a cult classic, that becomes like, even if it's a small niche, as long as it's enough to sustain more artistic work, why not? If you created something that you love, why not keep making stuff? Yeah, that's the goal. That's what you want. As long as you don't get stuck in a rut, as long as it's still fun, as long as you still like making new stuff, keep making new stuff, man. But that's exciting. It's nice to know that we have a definite release date, but it's also nice to know that it's not 100%. Well, I mean, it is finished, but once it's out, there's going to be more DLC. It's really nice to know. Launching it is obviously quite exciting, Helen said. What comes after for us is equally as exciting. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. It's like you almost kind of get scared and nervous about the release, because what happens if you release it and people don't like it? I'm sure they will, but what happens if you release it and people aren't as enthusiastic about it as you want it to be, as you want them to be? But what you're really excited for is, let's get this released so that I can start working on the DLC, so that I can start working on the sequels, so that I can start working on spin-offs, so that I can start working on, I don't know, merch or writing a guidebook or making a spin-off animated series based on the thing, if people like it enough. There's so much to be excited about, and the actual release is kind of not the exciting thing. And actually sometimes that's the scary thing, because when you're an artist and you really care about something passionately and you put it out there, it's hard. What if people don't get it? What if people don't like the vision? What if they don't like it? One of my favorite films in the entire world is a film called Brigsby Bear. Brigsby Bear is a very difficult film to explain, so I can't really explain it right now, because it's a truly unique movie. I mean, you watch like the first 20 minutes of it and it's like, where is this going? Oh my goodness. But yeah, a large portion of the film, I don't think it's spoilers to say, is about a very neurodiverse, very different character who has a passion project that they want to create. It's a movie, has a passion project, independent movie that they want to make. And their friends help them, and they manage to, somehow the world gets interested in their movie, and somehow their little passion project that they just kind of autistically wanted to create somehow gains world attention. And they're at the premiere of their own movie, and they're not even watching it with the audience. They're in the toilet being sick because they're so nervous about, after all this build-up, what happens if people don't like it. And without wanting to get too personal, that exact experience has happened to me at least 5-6 times when I've worked on a project for so many years, and you get so excited for people to see it, and then you have like a huge big event. Like for a movie, it's the premiere, but for a game, it's the release date. And everybody thinks that you should be so excited. This should be this big celebration. This should be this big party of like, oh, the work is finally over and we can celebrate, and I'm sharing it with the world, and everybody's going to be kissing my ass and telling me how great I am, and everybody's going to be, buying me drinks, and wow, this is amazing. Often it's like my least favorite part, and you just feel this sense of dread and this sense of sickness and this sense of, oh my God, I've been so excited about making this and sharing it with the world because I love it so much and I think it's great and I think people are going to love it. But then the actual reality of releasing it is terrifying. And I can imagine that with them being such artists and being so passionate and caring about this so much, and only now releasing it after all these years, only now releasing it because they feel 100% sure that it's exactly how they want it to be. There must be part of them that is terrified. What happens if we release this and people are disappointed and people hate it? So I'm sure they're not going to hear this, but I'm just sending a little, I'm sending good vibes out into the universe, and my thoughts are with them, because there's part of them that's going to be relieved that it's out there, but there is a huge part of them that is going to be terrified to do this. And I know I have experienced this personally, and I will continue to experience this for the rest of my life. As I said, I've been in the industry for such a long time. This has happened to me so many times. It never goes away. It never goes away. It is terrifying. And this is why even when a game comes out and it's bad, or even when a film comes out and it's bad, I always try not to dogpile on it. I always try to be diplomatic and say nice things to say about it, or try and point out good things, or try and say, yeah, okay, so people are giving Drag X Drive bad reviews, and okay, but actually there's good things about it, and actually it could be fixed, and here's how it could be fixed with updates, and here's why it's not Nintendo's fault that, I try and make excuses because I've been there and I've done that, Anyway, maybe I'm projecting a bit there because the quote itself is a bit more positive. Launching it is obviously quite exciting, Pellon said. But what comes after for us is equally as exciting. Yes, look towards the future. Look for what you can add to it. The most interesting thing now is what we can add to it next, Gibson said. We got a plan. Admittedly, some of the plans for that stuff are kind of ambitious as well. But hopefully we can achieve some of it. What a beautiful end to that article. Except that's not the end, because Jason Schreier has added, stay tuned for 2032 to see how that turns out. Jason, I was really enjoying your article. I thought it was written well. I don't like that last sentence. That's very snarky, mate. Stay tuned for 2032 to see how that turns out. Mate, you should be congratulating them for the fact that the game is coming out, and you should be excited about the fact that they want to make more content. You shouldn't be saying, oh, I'll believe that when I see it. That's Schreier. Don't be a dickhead. Don't be a dickhead, mate. Come on. I'm wishing them all the luck in the world with Silksong. I can't wait for this game. I am sure it's going to be good. I'm sure it's going to be just as good as we want it to be. Yes, there will be some people who are disappointed and lukewarm on it. Obviously, when you have so much hype for something, obviously some people are going to build it up to be something, and when it doesn't turn out to be what they expected it to be, that's going to disappoint them. And sometimes this is something I'm guilty of myself, of like when I review something and I'm like, well, I wanted it to be something, and then it's not what I wanted it to be, so therefore I don't like it. And I have to take a step back and go, no, that's not fair, because I'm reviewing a game that never existed, right? I'm just what I imagined in my head. No, let's take a step back and think about, let's be fair and review this for what it is, not for what I wanted it to be, And I think that's what everybody has to do. And also, I think just some people, because the hype is so high, people are going to expect this to be amazing. And there are going to be some people who buy this who've never played, like I say, who have literally never played a Metroidvania before, maybe never even played a 2D platformer before, but they're going to buy into the hype and they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to play this game. Everybody says it's the best game ever. And then they're going to play it and they're not going to get it because it's so different to anything else they've ever played before, or it's too difficult, so they can't get into it. There are going to be some people who are disappointed, obviously. But I don't think that's important. And it sounds like they don't pay very much attention to social media and online stuff anyway. So for me, I would just say to them, as long as they're happy with what they've released, then that's a win. That's a success. Even if everybody else hates it, even if it gets terrible reviews, it doesn't matter. If they put out what they want to put out and they're happy with it, and it's their artistic vision and they haven't compromised it, then they can be 100% happy. But I'm sure that there is going to be a lot of people, myself included, who love whatever it is that they've put out there. I can't wait for this one. I can't wait. Fantastic. Great article, great game. This has been Daily Switch 2 podcast. Thank you very much. I hope this has been interesting, and I hope you enjoyed some of my tangents and industry stories and thoughts. I know this has been a long one, but I think it might make an interesting podcast for those of you who are interested in hearing me talking about my rubbish. And if you are the kind of person who's interested in me telling my little stories and listening to me spouting off, thank you very much. I really do appreciate people who listen all the way to the end. Please remember to leave a like, leave a comment. Let me know what you think about anything within this article or Silksong itself. But also don't forget, linktree/dailyswitch2, linktr.ee/dailyswitch2. There's all the different ways that you can find this podcast. You don't have to watch on YouTube. You can listen on Spotify while you're doing your workouts or doing your cleaning the house. I know some people even tell me that they like to fall asleep while listening to my voice. listen. I don't know how to take that, but I'm going to take it as a compliment. And also, but we do have that free members area. And if you join the free members area, we do nice little monthly giveaways where we give away official Nintendo prizes. But also, I'd like to build up a little community there, and we can start doing community events like hangouts and chats and maybe some live streams and stuff like that. I think that would be really cool. Linktree/DailySwitch2, linktr.ee/DailySwitch2. Thank you so much for listening. My voice is going. I'm going to have to have some lemon honey tea, maybe take some paracetamol so that I can edit this. I think I'm not going to be able to talk tomorrow. Later, guys. Thank you.